What if I told you that beneath our feet lie entire cities? Some that have been hidden and forgotten for thousands of years, waiting to be uncovered. From the depths of the ocean to the heart of dense jungles, these are buried, lost civilizations that weren't meant to be found. Well, exciting news everyone, a story about the discovery of a long-lost city in the Amazon just came out this year. Scientists have uncovered a massive, ancient city hidden deep in the Amazon rainforest in the Apano area of eastern Ecuador. This place was buried under thick vegetation for thousands of years. For ages, we thought the Amazon was home to small nomadic groups or tiny villages, but this city proves that sophisticated urban societies once existed there. Professor Stephen Rothstein, who led the research, said, "This is older than any other site we know in the Amazon. We have a Eurocentric view of civilization, but this shows we have to change our idea about what is culture and civilization." The researchers used this super cool LiDAR technology, which is basically a high-tech method of scanning the ground from above, and discovered around 6,000 rectangular platforms and a network of roads and canals. One of the platforms measures 459 by 131 feet. What's also wild is that this society seemed to have been even bigger than the famous Maya civilizations in Central America. Jose Ariarte, an archaeology professor, stated, "Imagine that you discovered another civilization like the Maya, but with completely different architecture, land use, and ceramics." I mean, how cool is that? This discovery challenges everything we thought we knew about the Amazon. Professor Rothstein had apparently been warned against doing the research because many believed that no ancient groups like this lived in the Amazon, but in his own words, he was just stubborn enough to go ahead and do it anyway. They're planning to explore an adjoining area just as big, so who knows what else will be revealed in the very near future. Angkor Wat is an ancient Hindu-Buddhist temple complex found in Cambodia. Guinness World Records lists it as the largest religious structure in the entire world, so it's quite the sight. It was mostly neglected after the 16th century and wasn't known to the Western world until about 1860, when a French explorer named Henri Mahot popularized it in Europe with his travel notes, writing, "One of these temples, a rival to that of Solomon, and erected by some ancient Michelangelo, might take an honorable place beside our most beautiful buildings. It is grander than anything left to us by Greece or Rome." High praise, but then he went on to describe the locals as savages, so that kind of ruins it. Angkor Wat is pretty spectacular, but it's all that's left of what used to be a much larger city. Some say it was even bigger than modern-day New York. Now, in terms of the size of the area it covered, I'm not talking about population. At its peak, Angkor was likely home to hundreds of thousands of people, though, making it one of the largest urban centers in the world at the time. The city had an advanced irrigation system with canals and reservoirs, but over time the soil started to deplete, affecting crops and food production. Some researchers also believe droughts could have hit the region, and by the 15th century the city itself had mostly been left behind, but the temple complex of Angkor Wat was never completely abandoned. Derinkuyu is quite literally buried. It's an ancient underground city in Turkey that likely started being built around the 8th to 7th century BCE, but it wasn't fully formed until about 780 to 1180 CE, when it was used as a refuge during the Arab-Byzantine Wars, giving people shelter and protection against invasions. It's about 280 feet deep and can shelter around 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies. It's an insanely cool multiple level complex with large stone doors used to close off each floor separately, offering protection from the threats from above. It was built with wine and oil presses, stables, storage rooms, and even chapels. One room was believed to have been used as a religious school, with nearby spaces acting as studies. One of the coolest features is the deep ventilation shaft, which also worked as a well, so that the people living underground could have access to water. Derinkuyu continued being used over the centuries during various invasions, but eventually it was forgotten and lay hidden for years until a homeowner discovered it entirely by accident while renovating in 1963. They'd chased a chicken that ran into a hole in their basement only to find an entire network of underground tunnels. By 1969, parts of it were opened to the public, and today you can explore about half of this subterranean city. The Italian hilltop town of Orvieto has an entire network of underground tunnels that were kept secret for centuries. The underground city dates back to the ancient Etruscans. These early inhabitants started carving out tunnels in the volcanic rock to create wells and cisterns, and over time it evolved into a massive subterranean maze with over 1,200 interconnected tunnels and grottos. Some of the chambers contain remnants of Etruscan sanctuaries where ancient rituals took place, but these tunnels were used up until World War II and in every era in between. It was used for storage and refuge during tough times in the Roman era, the Middle Ages, and again, most recently, World War II, where parts of the underground network were used as bomb shelters. Again, the tunnels were kept secret for a long time, only made known to outsiders in recent years. Next up, we have the Özkonak underground city, again in Turkey. It's a network of tunnels carved into volcanic granite, connecting larger areas, and even has a pipe communication system that links all the different levels. It was rediscovered in 1972 by a farmer named Latif Akar, who was curious as to where all his excess water was going. He decided to investigate himself and ended up coming across this underground room. And then it was excavated, and it turned out to be a giant city that could house up to 60,000 people. Today, 4 floors of it are open to the public, but there are a total of 10 floors, reaching a depth of about 131 feet. Özkonak was built with some pretty interesting defensive capabilities too. Holes were built above the tunnels so that defenders could dump hot sand on intruders. The Nabateans were an ancient civilization that lived in the deserts of what is now Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. They're probably most well known for creating the stunning city of Petra, which really has to be one of the coolest places on Earth. They were, as you can probably tell, really good at architecture. Petra, often called the Rose City, is carved into the sides of sandstone cliffs, and it's one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world, for very good reason. They weren't just about building though, they were also incredible at surviving in harsh desert conditions. They developed advanced water management systems like dams, cisterns, and channels to capture and store rainwater in the dry desert. This allowed them to live in a place that most other civilizations would have struggled to survive in. They were also skilled traders, controlling trade routes that connected Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. They traded spices, incense, and other goods, which made them incredibly wealthy. Their success was partly due to their ability to adapt to the desert environment and make use of its resources in smart ways. They didn't leave behind written records, but they did leave behind structures and tons of artwork that has helped us piece together what their culture was probably like. The ancestral Puebloans, also known as the Anasazi, were a Native American civilization that lived in the southwestern United States, mainly in what's now Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. They're known for having built cliff dwellings and pueblos in the desert, especially in places like Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. Their homes were often carved right into the sides of cliffs, giving them protection from the harsh desert environment. They were also skilled architects and farmers. They lived in a dry desert, but they developed impressive irrigation systems to grow crops like corn, beans, and squash, and they also built large multi-story buildings, creating entire communities that could house hundreds of people. Their most famous site, Chaco Canyon, was a major center for culture and trade. It had grand ceremonial structures, large plazas, and roads leading in all different directions, almost like an ancient highway system of the desert. The Puebloans were also known for their intricate pottery, woven textiles, and beautiful rock art. Their culture was deeply connected to the land, with religious ceremonies tied to the cycles of nature, but by the late 1200s, they just mysteriously abandoned their cliff dwellings, and there's still some debate as to why. The Sumerians were one of the earliest known civilizations, and they lived in the deserts of Mesopotamia and what's now southern Iraq. They came about around 3500 BCE and are often credited with creating the first cities. The land they lived on was mostly dry and flat, but the Tigris and Euphrates rivers gave them the water they needed to survive. The Sumerians were also famous for developing one of the first writing systems, cuneiform. They used wedge-shaped marks on clay tablets to create everything from business transactions traditions to religious stories, and this allowed them to keep records and pass on knowledge across generations. The Sumerians were also skilled builders, engineers, and farmers. They created irrigation systems to water their crops, which helped them turn the desert into fertile land. And they also built impressive structures like ziggurats, which are these huge stepped pyramids that were used for religious ceremonies. Their cities like Ur and Uruk were bustling with activity, with markets, temples, and palaces. The Sumerians also made huge advances in math, science, and law, but then they disappeared, and their cities were buried under layers of sand until being rediscovered in the 19th century. The Hohokam were an ancient civilization that lived in the deserts of the American Southwest, mainly in what is now Arizona, from around 300 to 1500 CE. Now, the Hohokam, that's not what they were actually called, but that's what archaeologists have named them. They're best known for their canal systems. They took advantage of the little water they had, creating hundreds of miles of irrigation canals that helped them grow crops like corn, beans, and squash in the desert. Canals were so advanced that some of them are still visible to this day, and they used the flow of water from rivers like the Salt River to channel water to their fields, and this allowed them to support large communities, even in a desert where water is obviously scarce. They lived in these large planned settlements with houses made of adobe and wood. They built platform mounds for religious ceremonies, and they were skilled in pottery, creating intricate designs that have been rediscovered by archaeologists. But like so many other civilizations on this list, the Hohokam mysteriously disappeared around 1500 CE.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Valeriana, Mexico. We are starting off with the most recent discovery, which was just announced this week. Deep within the dense jungles of Mexico's Campeche state, a massive Maya city, lost for centuries beneath the canopy, has been accidentally rediscovered, turning our understanding of ancient civilizations on its head. PhD student Luke Ald Thomas stumbled upon this hidden metropolis, now named Valeriana, while sifting through online LiDAR data intended for environmental monitoring. Using this laser mapping technology, which reveals structures buried under thick vegetation, he uncovered pyramids, sports fields, causeways connecting districts, and amphitheaters sprawled across an area the size of Edinburgh. Dating back to 750 to 850 AD, Valeriana may have been home to 30,000 to 50,000 people, more than the region's population today. Astonishingly, this lost city lies just a 15-minute hike from a major road near Ishpuil, yet it remained hidden because the jungle had entirely reclaimed it. The discovery challenges the old notion that the tropics were inhospitable to advanced civilizations, unveiling instead a rich and complex Maya culture that thrived here, with thousands of buildings including plazas with temple pyramids and evidence of sophisticated urban planning. Valeriana offers a captivating glimpse into a world that was never meant to be found. In our number 9 spot today, we have El Mirador in Guatemala. Hidden deep within the jungles of northern Guatemala is El Mirador, an ancient Maya city that remained lost for nearly 2,000 years. Once a thriving metropolis and the capital of the Maya civilization, it housed around 200,000 people and featured monumental structures like the Ladanta Pyramid, one of the largest pyramids in the world by volume. Archaeologists like Richard Hansen have been unearthing its secrets, revealing a sophisticated society that existed centuries earlier than previously thought. The city boasts massive pyramids, intricate friezes depicting mythological hero twins, and an extensive network of causeways connecting it to other Maya sites. Isn't it astounding that such an advanced civilization could vanish into the jungle only to reshape our understanding of history when it was rediscovered? In our number 8 spot today, we have Angamuco in Mexico. Nestled in the dense forests of Michoacan, Angamuco was an ancient city built by the Purépecha civilization, which were fierce rivals of the Aztecs. Founded around 900 CE, this sprawling metropolis is thought to have been home to up to 100,000 people at its peak, making it comparable in size to modern-day cities. The city remained concealed under thick vegetation until 2007, 2000 when archaeologists stumbled upon it. But it wasn't until 2011 that the true scale of Engamuko was revealed thanks to LiDAR technology. By shooting lasers from airplanes to penetrate the jungle canopy, researchers mapped out an area covering about 26 square kilometers or 10 square miles, uncovering thousands of structures that had been hidden for over a millennium. Engamuko is astonishing for its sheer size and complexity. The city features an intricate network of pyramids, plazas, roadways, and residential areas. What's particularly fascinating is its urban planning. Unlike other Mesoamerican cities that were built around a central core, Engamuko's structures are spread out evenly, almost like a grid. This challenges previous notions about urban development in ancient civilization. Isn't it kind of mind-blowing that such a massive city, bustling with life centuries ago, could just vanish into the jungle and escape our notice until recently? It definitely makes you wonder what other secrets are still hidden beneath the trees, waiting to reshape our understanding of history. In our number 7 spot today, we have Ko Khair in Cambodia. Hidden deep within the remote jungles of northern Cambodia lies Ko Khair, a long-forgotten city that once served as the capital of the Khmer Empire from 928 to 944 CE. For centuries, this remarkable place was swallowed by dense forests, its temples and monuments concealed by overgrown vegetation. It wasn't until French explorers ventured into the area in the late 19th century that Ko Khair resurfaced from obscurity. The site is famous for its unique 7-tiered pyramid, which stands out with its striking and unconventional architecture, unlike anything else in the region. Scattered throughout the area are numerous temples adorned with intricate stone sculptures, offering a glimpse into a brief but significant period when the Khmer capital shifted away from Angkor. While many of these artifacts were once targets of looting, they are now protected, allowing us to appreciate the distinct artistic styles and cultural innovations of that era.
Seems like nobody does underground cities better than Turkey, because we have another one on the list. Kaymakli. This site was first opened to tourists in 1964, and it's believed to have been built in the 8th to 7th centuries BCE, carved out of soft volcanic rock. As time went on, especially during the Byzantine era, the city expanded significantly to protect its inhabitants from raids. Kaymakli is actually connected to Derinkuyu through a network of tunnels spanning over 5.5 miles. And today, some of these tunnels are still used for storage, stables, and cellars. The tunnels are a bit different from the ones in Derinkuyu. They are lower, narrower, and more steeply inclined. The 4 floors open to visitors are designed around ventilation shafts, which were of course very important for survival underground. On the first floor, you'll find a stable and a stone door leading to a church. Lower down, you'll find a church, storage areas, kitchens, and block formations that were used for cold copper processing. Let's talk about Thonis, an ancient city that's now submerged beneath the Mediterranean Sea. This Egyptian port city was located near the mouth of the Nile River and was once a hub for trade, especially with Greece and other Mediterranean regions. Thonis was very important in ancient Egypt's economy and was filled with these grand temples and statues dedicated to gods and goddesses, but then it sank beneath the sea, and for centuries it was lost and forgotten, until it was rediscovered by underwater archaeologists in 2000. And along with the remnants of the city itself, divers found these remarkably well-preserved artifacts like statues and pottery. Aktun Tonikil Mcnal, or ATM for short, is an incredible cave in Belize full of ancient Maya history. Ceramics, fascinating stoneware, and a famous skeleton have all been found here, and more. The famous skeleton in question is known as the Crystal Maiden, believed to be that of a 17-year-old boy. His bones have calcified over time, giving them a sparkling, crystallized look, hence the name. A lot of the ceramics found here have what are called kill holes, which were made to release spirits, meaning this cave was probably used for ceremonial practices. The cave is just stunning, the type of thing you'd see in an Indiana Jones movie. You'll also have a variety of wildlife here. Bats, crabs, tropical fish, otters. You can go here, but not on your own. Tourism is carefully managed, so you can explore it with a tour guide. Makes sense, they want to make sure the place is preserved Plus, it can be pretty dangerous. The main cave system stretches about 3 miles long, with sections that can get pretty tight. And during heavy rain, the river level rises, in which case it's completely closed off to tourists. Now we head over to Poland to check out Wieliczka salt mine. This mine has been in use in some form since the Neolithic times, with salt production starting as early as 1044. Excavation officially began in the 13th century, and the mine kept producing table salt until 1996, making it one of the oldest salt mines in the world. The maze of tunnels stretches over 178 miles and reaches depths of about 1,073 feet deep. You can visit the place today, and it's not just a mine. There's some incredible stuff to see. There's an underground lake and chapel, and tons of beautiful sculptures, all carved out of salt. Based on the images I've seen online, the place looks like something you'd see in a sword and sorcery movie. It's amazing. During World War II, the mine was repurposed by the Germans for war-related manufacturing, with forced laborers brought in to work underground. Nauers is a charming little village in northern France, home to about 1,200 people, but just a short walk away, there's an ancient underground city that once housed around 3 times that number of people. The caves were hand-carved during the Middle Ages and stretch about 2 miles with over 300 rooms. The underground was built for villagers seeking shelter from invasions. It was made so that people could stay down there for long stretches of time. They built areas for livestock and water wells, and there were areas for people to gather and hang out. And here's a really cool thing about this underground city: there were bakeries. To keep the smoke from the ovens hidden, too, the chimneys were rooted through the houses above. So while the villagers baked bread down below, the invaders above would think people were still in their homes, and then would be very confused when they broke inside and saw that there was nobody there. The caves remained a secret until 1887, when they were rediscovered, and soldiers during both world wars took refuge here. In fact, you can still see graffiti and carvings left behind by Australian and British troops. The Minoans are one of the coolest lost civilizations, said by some to be the first civilization in Europe. They lived on the island of Crete in the Mediterranean around 2000 BCE. Their story is pretty fascinating because, again, they mysteriously vanished and their civilization wasn't rediscovered until the 20th century. They were advanced with their own writing system, artwork, and all these impressive palaces. The biggest one, Palace of Knossos, or what's left of it, looks like something out of a myth. I can only imagine how incredible it must have looked when it was all still there. The Minoans were traders, sailing all over the Mediterranean, which helped them spread their culture and influence. And around 1450 BCE, the Minoans faded away. Some believe a massive volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera caused it. Could have also been invasions, but it wasn't until the early 1900s that archaeologists started uncovering the remains of their cities and palaces, piecing together their society. The Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization, is one of the most impressive ancient cultures rediscovered in the desert. This civilization lived over 4,000 years ago in what's now Pakistan and northwest India, in the desert regions near the Indus River. They were incredibly advanced, with well-planned cities, drainage systems, and standardized brick sizes. They were very organized. Their 2 main cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, were massive, with streets laid out and neat grids. They also had sophisticated water management systems with public baths and wells, but even though we have all this evidence left behind from them, we still don't know how to read their writing system, which means we can only guess about their language and the reason for their sudden collapse around 1900 BCE. In the early 20th century, archaeologists discovered the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro buried beneath layers of earth, and today we know they were an incredibly advanced society, but there's still a lot of mystery about their culture. Next up, we have the Napta Stones, which are a series of old structures in the Nubian desert. They're around 6,000 to 7,000 years old. They were discovered by a team of archaeologists led by Fred Wendorf in the 70s. The stones are flat rocks and big stones set up in a circular formation. Some are hefty, weighing tons. Now, what these stones were actually for is still a bit of a mystery. Some think they might have been an early form of a calendar, though, and they also line up with astronomical events, which tells us that the ancient builders knew their astronomy, doing some incredibly precise measuring for the time. But we're still not sure about who set these things up. Jado is an abandoned ghost town in Niger, deep in the Sahara Desert. Found on the Jado Plateau, the ancient settlement's true name is still a mystery because no formal excavation has ever been carried out. The ruins sit on top of cliffs, and below them, hidden ponds that almost dry up in certain seasons, perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes. Jado was most likely founded by the Sao people, who were known for setting up other settlements around Lake Chad. It seems like at one time there was a bustling city here, and some think it could have been part of the Kanem-Bornu Empire from as early as the 13th century. By the 19th century, though, repeated raids by the Tuareg and the spread of malaria from cattle herding pushed people out. By the mid-20th century, only a handful of people remained, relying on date farming and salt harvesting. In 1930, during French colonial rule, a military outpost was set up nearby. Jado stayed relatively quiet until 2014 when gold was discovered in the area, so then there was a rush, attracting thousands of miners from across North Africa, but mining operations were shut down in 2017. The Norte Chico civilization is one of the most mysterious ancient societies in the Americas, located in what is now Peru. Dating back to around 3000 BCE, it might be the oldest known civilization in the Americas. The ruins have revealed some amazing finds, mainly huge pyramids and intricate irrigation systems. There's still a lot we don't know about how people actually lived though. So far, 6 pyramids have been discovered, with the biggest one being Pyramide Mayor. Now, these structures aren't as flashy as later Inca pyramids, but they're still impressive and interesting because we just know so little about the people who built them. The Norte Chico people didn't make pottery either, which is kind of unusual for ancient civilizations. Instead, they're thought to have used gourds, which of course don't last for thousands and thousands of years. There's not much art or decoration either, but it's believed they had some kind of belief in a higher power, though what exactly they worshipped is still unknown. The civilization seemed to be centered around 3 main rivers, and by 1800 BCE, the settlements were mysteriously abandoned. Well, if we're talking about incredible ancient civilizations in deserts, we can't not talk about the ancient Egyptians, right? They lived along the Nile River, but the surrounding desert played a huge role in shaping their culture. This civilization started around 3100 BCE and is known for their incredible and mysterious monuments like the pyramids and the Sphinx. The Egyptians were absolutely brilliant when it came to architecture, engineering, astronomy. They were so advanced that we're still trying to figure out how they did it all. They built massive stone structures, and their understanding of the stars helped them create a pretty accurate calendar. And the Egyptians also had just a rich culture with art, writing, religion, mummies. They created hieroglyphics, one of the earliest forms of writing, to record everything from royal orders to daily life. Their gods and goddesses like Ra, the sun god, were a huge part of their rituals and beliefs. For centuries, the desert kept their secrets hidden, but over time, archaeologists started digging up tombs, walking into these incredible temples, and finding all sorts of artifacts that we're still amazed by to this day. And even with all we've learned about the ancient Egyptians, there are still plenty of mysteries, still unexplored areas of the pyramids, and still questions and conspiracies about their technology.
In our number 6 spot today, we have Calakmul, Mexico. Hidden deep within the dense jungles of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula lies Calakmul, an ancient Maya city that was once a dominant force in the Maya world. After its decline around the 10th century CE, this place was swallowed by the forest, its massive pyramids and palaces forgotten for nearly a millennium. It wasn't until 1931 that biologist Cyrus L. Lundell, while conducting an aerial survey, spotted the towering structures peeking through the canopy and brought this lost city back into the world's attention. Archaeologists have since uncovered over 6,000 structures, including some of the tallest pyramids ever built by the Maya. Calakmul was a fierce rival to Tikal in present-day Guatemala, and the discoveries here have shed incredible light on ancient Maya politics, warfare, and the complex dynamics between competing city-states. In our number 5 spot today, we have Ciudad Perdida. Hidden deep within Colombia's Sierra Nevada mountains lies Ciudad Perdida, the Lost City, an awe-inspiring ancient metropolis built by the Tairona people around 800 CE, centuries before Machu Picchu. Swallowed by dense rainforest and forgotten for over a millennia, it remained hidden until treasure hunters stumbled upon its moss-covered stone steps in 1972. The site boasts a complex network of tiled roads, terraces, and circular plazas carved into the mountainside, showcasing the Tairona's remarkable urban planning and engineering skills. Exploring Ciudad Perdida not only unveils the secrets of a civilization that thrived in harmony with nature, but also leaves us wondering how many more lost worlds are waiting to be discovered beneath the jungle canopy. In our number 4 spot today, we have the lost city of the monkey god in Honduras. Hidden deep within a rainforest in Honduras lies the legendary lost city of the monkey god, also known as La Ciudad Blanca or the White City. For centuries, explorers and locals spoke of this mysterious place, shrouded in myth and said to be filled with immense treasures and guarded by ancient deities. In 2015, a team of researchers made a groundbreaking discovery using LiDAR technology, which allowed them to see through the dense jungle canopy from the air. What they found were structures hinting at a complex pre-Columbian society that had been lost to time. As archaeologists ventured into the untouched terrain, they uncovered plazas, elaborate earthworks, and a stunning cache of stone sculptures depicting animals and possibly deities, all evidence of a civilization that thrived between 1000 and 1400 CE. The discovery not only confirmed age-old legends, but also provided invaluable insights into a forgotten chapter of human history. In our number 3 spot today, we have Cuelap in Peru. Hidden high in the cloud forests of northern Peru lies Cuelap, an ancient fortress built by the enigmatic Chachapoya culture around the 6th century CE. Overgrown and concealed by dense vegetation for centuries, it wasn't until the 19th century that explorers rediscovered this monumental site. Cuelap boasts massive stone walls soaring up to 60 feet high and encompasses hundreds of circular stone buildings perched atop a mountain ridge. These architectural marvels offer a tantalizing glimpse into the lives of the warriors of the clouds, as the Chachapoya are known. The sheer scale and sophistication of Cuelap rival that of more famous sites, yet it remains one of history's best kept secrets. In our number 2 spot today, we have the secret Amazon city. Hidden for millennia beneath the dense canopy of the Amazon rainforest, an enormous ancient city has been unearthed in the Upano region of eastern Ecuador, radically altering our understanding of Amazonian history. Previously, it was believed that the Amazon was home only to nomadic tribes or small settlements. But this city, built around 2,500 years ago and inhabited for up to a millennia, tells a very different story. Archaeologists discovered an astonishing network of roads and canals connecting over 6,000 rectangular platforms, each about 20 meters by 10 meters and up to 3 meters high, arranged in groups around central plazas. Some structures, like the massive 140 by 40 meter platform at Quilamope, suggests ceremonial purposes. This sophisticated road system includes straight paths that extend up to 25 kilometers, featuring impressive right angles and engineering that managed the abundant water through canals. Nestled in the shadow of a volcano that enriched the soil, but may have also led to the society's demise, this metropolis challenges Eurocentric views of civilization by revealing a complex, interconnected urban society thriving in the Amazon. Who would have imagined that beneath the jungle's lush greenery lay a city possibly rivaling the size and complexity of ancient highland civilizations like Machu Picchu? And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Mahendra Parvata. Hidden deep within Cambodia's dense jungles lies an ancient city from the Khmer Empire that remained concealed for centuries. Although explorers had inklings of its existence, it wasn't until 2012 that the true extent of this lost city was revealed, thanks to archaeologists Jean-Baptiste Chavance and Damien Evans using cutting-edge LiDAR technology. This airborne laser scanning peeled back the jungle canopy to unveil an elaborate grid of temples, roads, and ponds, all dating back to 802 AD, making it about 350 years older than Angkor Wat. Founded by Jayavarman II, the city's name means Mountain of the Great Indra, referencing the sacred mountain where he was crowned the first king of the Khmer Empire. Even the French archaeologist Philippe Stern, who explored the area in 1936, only scratched the surface of its secrets.
If you head to the border of modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, you'll find the ruins of a society that was essentially living in the future 4,000 years ago. These people didn't just build huts, they built massive cities like Mohenjo-daro, a place with organized street grids, multi-story brick houses, and a drainage system so advanced it wouldn't be matched in Europe for another 3,000 years. They had public baths, they traded, and had their own writing system that to this day no one's been able to decode. Alright, but the creepy part. When archaeologists started digging into Mohenjo-daro in the 1920s, they found groups of skeletons lying in what used to be the busy streets of the city. What happened to them? Were they soldiers? Well, no. They were families, and there were no signs that the people had died violently. No sword hacks or arrowheads stuck in their ribs or anything, so what happened to all of them? The leading theory is a sudden outbreak of something like malaria or cholera, but we can't say for sure. What we do know is that if there were survivors, they left in a hurry, because they didn't even stop to bury their dead. In the northern highlands of Ethiopia, there was once a kingdom called Aksum. It was so rich and powerful, the Roman Empire considered it one of the 4 greatest nations on the planet. It controlled the trade routes between the Mediterranean and India, and they spent all that wealth on some of the most insane stonework ever seen. They carved what are called stelae, these giant granite towers cut from a single block of stone. The biggest one, the Great Stela, stood over 100 feet tall and weighed about 500 tons. But then, around the 7th century, the empire started shrinking. They stopped minting their famous gold coins, abandoned their ports, and retreated into the mountains. But why? Well, one story blames a queen named Gudit. According to the legend, she was a nasty ruler who went on this violent rampage against Aksum, burning and destroying pretty much everything in her path. Archaeologists have actually found huge layers of ash from that time, along with signs that the damage was done on purpose. Someone tore down the massive stone towers and burned libraries to the ground. Nobody knows for sure if Gudit was a real person or just a kind of symbol of some massive rebellion, but either way, Aksum basically disappeared into the dark for centuries. 6,000 years ago, in what's now Ukraine, Romania, and Moldova, a group of people built mega sites that were easily the biggest settlements on the planet at the time. These cities could hold upwards of 15,000 people, and for the time, that was a lot. But they had a strange ritual. For whatever reason, every 60 to 80 years, the entire population would pack up their things, grab torches, and intentionally burn their entire city to the ground. Every single house and temple was turned into a massive bonfire. Excavations at sites like Talgenki show that these fires were so hot that the clay walls actually fused into a ceramic-like glass. This wasn't an accident or an attack. Again, it was deliberate, and they did this for 2,000 years straight. Then around 3000 BCE, the cycle stopped. They didn't leave a new city behind. They burnt the last one down and just walked away. There are tons of theories as to why they did this. Some researchers think they were trying to kind of cleanse the land after plagues kept coming back up, but it's impossible to say for sure. Nanbadol is a city of 92 artificial islands built on a coral reef off the coast of Pohnpei in Micronesia. It's built out of thousands of massive basalt columns that were stacked like logs to form walls. Some of these stones weigh up to 50 tons, and they were quarried on the opposite side of the island before being moved onto a reef in the middle of the ocean. They did all of this without wheels, metal tools, or pulleys, but the total weight of the stone used, only about 750,000 tons. Legend says the city was also run by rulers who used its isolation to keep a pretty tight, almost terrifying control over everyone who lived there. With no fresh water and no way to grow food on the reef, everything had to come in by boat. That meant the rulers could starve out anyone who stepped out of line. Even today, it's said that at night the spirits of the workers who died during the construction still haunt the ruins. Deep in the Gobi Desert in Mongolia, as well as parts of the Sahara, geologists have come across something kinda weird. There are huge areas where the sand has been melted into sheets of green glass, a substance called trinitite. Usually you only see this when sand is hit by a direct lightning strike or a massive meteorite, but in these specific spots in the Gobi, there are no impact craters, no iron from space, and the glass is spread out over miles in a way that you just wouldn't get with lightning. Eerily, this glass is identical to what was found at the Trinity test site in New Mexico after the first atomic bomb was detonated in 1945. So this has led to decades of theories, including ancient technology conspiracies. Mainstream science leans more towards something like a meteor airburst, where a space rock explodes in the sky with the force of a nuclear blast, but again, there's no clear trace of space debris in the glass. All we really know is that something happened in that desert thousands of years ago that generated enough heat to melt the Earth into glass. One time, the Vinca civilization was one of the largest prehistoric cultures in Europe. They were around for about 1500 years. From about 5500 BCE to 4000 BC. They were in parts of what is now Serbia and Romania. The civilization is named after the village of Vinca and the Danube River, where some of the biggest archaeological discoveries were made in the 20th century. The Vinca people had advanced metalworking skills, especially when it came to copper. They excavated the earliest known mine in Europe, and they actually may have been the first civilization in the world to work with copper. These people didn't have a fully developed writing system, but archaeologists have found examples of proto-writing, symbols and marks that don't form a language necessarily, but may have been used as a kind of early form of communication. Their society was also quite organized. Their homes were carefully planned with designated areas for waste disposal. They've also found children's toys during excavations, like animal figures and rattles. The Zapotec civilization, ever heard of them? They're usually overshadowed by the more famous Aztecs and Maya, but they were one of the earliest cultures in Mesoamerica. They were pioneers when it came to agriculture and developed one of the first writing systems in the region. Their biggest city was Monte Alban, built around the 5th century BCE. It was around for around 1200 years and at its peak housed around 25,000 people. The ruling class was made up of priests, warriors, and artists overseeing the lower classes, and they subjugated nearby areas, assimilating them into their civilization. What caused their decline? It's not entirely clear. Monte Alban was mostly left intact when the civilization began to fade, so it doesn't seem like there was a catastrophic event that caused the downfall. Could have been economic trouble, which caused people to up and look for work in other places. Eventually, the remaining groups split up into other city-states, which started to compete against each other, which led to the end of their culture altogether. The Hittites. These were an ancient Anatolian civilization that came about around the 2nd millennium BCE in what is now modern-day Turkey. They formed a powerful empire, reaching their peak in the mid-14th century BCE under a king named Suppiluliuma I. At the time, they controlled a large territory that included much of Anatolia and parts of northern Syria. For centuries, the Hittites were only known about through references in other cultures, mainly because their civilization had collapsed by the end of the 12th century BCE. The remnants of their empire was lost to time, and it wasn't until the 19th century that physical evidence of them was rediscovered. In 1834, a French scholar by the name of Charles Texier found what would later be known as the Hittite ruins. At the time, he didn't recognize how significant they were. In the late 1800s, though, archaeological findings at sites like Koltepe revealed trade records mentioning the land of Hatti. Then in 1906, archaeologist Hugo Winkler uncovered over 10,000 clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform, one of the oldest known forms of writing. And these tablets revealed tons of stuff about the Hittite Empire and how it was governed, their culture, and their language. The Nabateans were an Arab civilization that lived in northern Arabia and the southern Levant. Their most famous city, Petra, is in modern-day Jordan and was a major trading hub that connected a number of trade routes across the region. The Nabateans lived between the 4th and 2nd centuries BCE and built a kingdom centered around trade, becoming pretty wealthy and influential. They were very independent, able to fend off several attempts by empires, including the Romans, to control them, but in 106 CE, Emperor Trajan annexed their kingdom into the Roman Empire. The Nabateans still managed to preserve a large part of their culture though, which included finely crafted ceramics and very distinctive architecture, like the rock-cut buildings found in Petra. Their history dates back to at least 312 BCE, when they were first mentioned in battle reports. As they expanded, they gained control over key territories, including Damascus. Petra became quite the city, home to around 20,000 people at its height. Over time, the Nabateans adopted Greek as the dominant language, and by the 5th century, many of them had converted to Christianity. The civilization's decline began with the rise of new Arab groups, and eventually, the Nabatean culture dissipated. Forget what you thought you knew about the ancient Amazon. For ages, people pictured these small wandering groups living there, but that wasn't really the case. In Ecuador's Upano Valley, for example, archaeologists have basically pulled back the curtain on a massive, interconnected network of ancient cities. They cover over 100 square miles with thousands of rectangular platforms that were likely homes and ceremonial spots. What's even wilder is how they found it though. Researchers used this super cool technology called LiDAR, which shoots laser pulses from an airplane right through the dense jungle canopy. It's like X-ray vision, but for the forest. And with it, researchers have found these grids of roads and paths with canals connecting them. Some roads stretch an amazing 16 miles. This tells us that people were seriously organized and had some impressive knowledge of engineering. They built a complex urban society, possibly home to tens, even hundreds of thousands of people, growing corn and sweet potatoes, probably brewing chicha. It completely flips our understanding of ancient Amazonian life. Imagine flying over the Amazon and spotting these enormous geometric shapes carved right into the ground. That's exactly what started happening in the 70s in Brazil's Acre State as parts of the forest were being cleared for farming. These incredible carvings are called geoglyphs, and they're massive patterns ancient Amazonian people created by digging deep trenches. You have perfect circles, squares, rectangles, some of them stretching over 980 feet wide and up to 13 feet deep. There are hundreds of these formations spread across more than 300 archaeological sites in Acre alone. Archaeologists think these geoglyphs date back as far as 1000 BCE. As for exactly what they were for, that's still a bit of a mystery. Some think they were gathering places for ceremonies. They may have also been used for defense though, a bit like trenches, but that's just an idea. What's nuts is that these ancient groups transformed the landscape on such a massive scale without any metal tools. They only used stone tools to dig these things. Right at the mouth of the Amazon River, there's a huge island called Marajo. For a long time, researchers knew about some intricate pottery found there, but then there was the discovery that ancient people on the island built these massive dirt mounds. The culture known as the Marajoara were living there from about 400 to 1600 CE. These were deliberately constructed mounds. Some were gigantic, reaching heights of 60 feet. That's like a 6-story building made of dirt. They built their villages right on top of these mounds, probably trying to stay safe, dry during floods. Inside and around these mounds, archaeologists have found detailed pottery, burial sites, and clear signs that there was farming going on. They were growing crops like maize and a starchy root vegetable called manioc. These all point to a highly organized society that mastered living in a very challenging environment for over 1,000 years. Alright, so this next one is super cool because it doesn't have to do with buildings, but about the very soil itself. Soil ancient people actually made. It's called terra preta, which simply means black soil in Portuguese, and you find it in patches all over the Amazon basin. What makes it so special is that it's incredibly rich, dark, sometimes several feet deep, and way more fertile than the natural reddish Amazonian soil. Scientists have figured out that ancient Amazonians created this soil on purpose. They mixed things like charcoal, broken pottery pieces, plant waste, and animal bones into the regular dirt. This created a super rich, self-sustaining soil that stayed fertile for centuries, sometimes even thousands of years. It's estimated that up to 10% of the non-flooded Amazon land might be this material. This was a major discovery because it proved these ancient groups weren't just living in the Amazon, that they were actively reshaping their environment. It's pretty cool. This one sort of blends ancient legends with modern day exploration. I'm talking about the ongoing search for Patiti, and for centuries explorers and a good number of treasure hunters have been obsessed with finding this supposed massive Inca city hidden deep in the Amazon jungle, just east of the Andes Mountains. There are historical accounts from Spanish conquistadors who said they heard of this secret city where Inca nobles supposedly fled with their gold and treasures after the Spanish arrived. Now, we haven't found a single city of gold like in the movies yet, but recent archaeological work and satellite images are pointing to something out there. For example, in 2007, researchers found a bunch of ancient structures, things like ceremonial platforms and old homes in super remote parts of southeastern Peru, exactly where many believe Patiti could be. And there are still places being discovered under the thick canopy of trees all the time. By archaeology standards, anyway. I don't mean like literally every day. Point is, the Amazon is so massive, who knows what else could be hiding out there. Maybe there's some truth to this legend. If you look at maps from the 16th and 17th centuries, you'll see a massive territory labeled Tartaria or Grand Tartary, stretching across Central Asia and Siberia. Now, most historians will tell you it's not some hidden empire. It was more like a loose catch-all name Europeans slapped on huge parts of Asia that they didn't really understand back then. Pretty boring explanation, honestly, but also one that actually holds up. Online, though, there's another theory. There's a whole corner of the internet that insists Tartaria wasn't just a map label, but a real, highly advanced civilization that got wiped out and erased from the history books. This is where things start to get pretty far-fetched, but interesting all the same. People have mentioned old buildings in Europe and parts of the USA, saying the architecture feels too grand and uniform to be coincidence. Some even go further and claim those big domes and spires weren't just decorative, but were actually some kind of free energy technology, like antennas pulling energy from the air. And there's the mud flood idea, which is probably the most famous part of this. They pointed to old buildings in cities like London and Moscow where the lower floors look half buried almost, like the street level rose up around them, and they argue there was some global event in the 1800s that buried an older civilization, and what we see now are just the upper parts of much larger buildings, with an entire civilization buried deep underground. There's an eerie story that in 1911, two miners were digging in a cave near Lovelock, Nevada, when they hit a layer of ancient debris. As they dug deeper, they found mummified remains that didn't look like any of the tribespeople in the area that they'd ever seen. Not only were they redheads, supposedly they were over 7 feet tall. It did turn out, however, that there were legends told by the local Paiute tribe about a group of red-haired giants called the Sidika, who were so aggressive and predatory that the tribes eventually banded together to trap them in that exact cave and burn them alive. But as the find gained fame, many of the original skeletons and artifacts were reportedly lost or taken into private collections, leaving only a few fragments in small museums. In 1986, in Sichuan province, China, workers came across two massive pits filled with thousands of bronze artifacts that have been buried for 3,000 years. These belong to the Sangshan Dui culture, a society that left behind absolutely no written records. The creepiest and also coolest finds were these massive bronze masks with huge protruding eyes. They almost look like alien-type beings. They're unlike any other human faces found in ancient Chinese art, and they're really well made. The culture seemed to reach an incredible level of bronze working, but then just suddenly disappeared. But before they abandoned the site, they broke and burned all these priceless bronze masks and threw them into pits. It seemed deliberate. Again, we have no records to explain who they were, or what these wide-eyed faces were supposed to represent, or why they felt the need to burn and bury their entire culture. The Minoans lived on the island of Crete and were basically the most advanced people in the area during the Bronze Age. They had massive palaces like Knossos with actual plumbing and sophisticated art. They were mostly known for trading across the Mediterranean, but everything fell apart around 1450 BCE. Most people point to a volcano eruption at a nearby island, but there's a creepier element to the story than just a natural disaster. Inside the ruins at Knossos, archaeologists found evidence of human sacrifice in the very last layers of the site. They found a man on an altar, killed right as a massive earthquake was destroying the palace. These people were so desperate and panicked that they turned to human sacrifice to try and save themselves. Obviously, it didn't work. Akkad was the capital of the world's first empire, located somewhere in modern-day Iraq. 4,000 years ago, it was the most important city in the world, ruled by a king named Sargon the Great. Everyone knew where it was. It was the center of trade and power for over 100 years, but after the empire collapsed around 2150 BCE, the city completely disappeared. Archaeologists have been looking for Akkad for over a century, and they haven't found a single thing. No walls, no foundations, nothing. We have thousands of clay tablets from other cities that talk about it, but the actual city is nowhere to be found. It's a ghost. Researchers have used satellites and ground radar all over the desert and still come up empty. And this isn't an Atlantis situation, by the way. Akkad is really believed to have existed. So for such an important city like this, a place that was written about in so much detail, that is pretty bizarre. If you've ever flown over northern Bolivia, especially during the dry season, you might spot thousands of ancient earthworks. This area is known as the Llanos de Moxos or the Beni Savannas. There are incredibly complex systems of raised fields, long causeways, canals, artificial mounds, and forest islands that were intentionally planted. This entire engineered landscape stretches out over a massive 50,000 square miles. Archaeologists have discovered that different cultures built these things over thousands of years, starting as far back as 800 CE, and were around right up until Europeans showed up. The ancient Amazonians were brilliant engineers, figuring out how to completely redesign their environment to handle both the extreme wet and dry seasons. Those raised fields were perfect for farming even when everything else was flooded. Canals helped with irrigation and transportation, and the artificial mounds were where they built their villages. It totally flips the script on the old idea that the Amazon was just this green desert that couldn't support big populations. At Serra de Capivara National Park in northeastern Brazil, there's an insane collection of rock art, with some sites holding thousands of individual paintings spread across hundreds of natural rock shelters. The pieces depict everything from hunting scenes and daily life to animals, rituals, and you also have your more abstract symbols. Some of these paintings have been around for a very long time. Some could be up to 25,000 years old, maybe even more. That makes them some of the oldest evidence of human presence in the Americas. These people have been living here for a very, very long time. It challenges the earlier theories about when and how humans first settled in the Americas, pushing back the timeline quite a bit. Now, like I said earlier, for ages people thought that the Amazon just couldn't support big settled groups before Europeans showed up. Like, sure, there were some small tribes, but no major cities. Well, new discoveries have shown that there were large areas of what some are calling garden cities. These super modified landscapes stretching across different regions. We're uncovering tons of proof that these ancient communities were master forest managers, practicing large-scale farming and living in settlements that were more spread out, not crammed together like European cities, but still connected by trails and clearings. Scientists are digging up more and more evidence of them intentionally planting trees, carefully managing what plants were useful, and not to mention that super soil that we chatted about earlier. All of this points to them supporting way bigger communities than anyone ever thought. So no, the Amazon wasn't this untapped wilderness. It was actually very well managed. Deep in Rondônia, Brazil, archaeologists have been finding proof ancient fortified settlements. I'm not talking about just a few simple ditches. These are big, some of what look like stone walls or foundations, which is a huge deal because stone is not a common building material in the Amazon. For example, at places like the Toatonio waterfall area on the Madeira River, they found signs of large settlements that were occupied for thousands of years, with some going back as far as 8,000 years. The size of these places and how long people lived there, plus the fact that they had defenses, it tells us that these communities were pretty established and would have needed to protect their resources and land. Alright, this last one is super fascinating because it's about a very distinct type of settlement discovered using satellite imagery. In the upper Tapajos region of the Brazilian Amazon, researchers have found evidence of ancient villages laid out in almost perfect circles. They've been deliberately designed this way, some dating back as far as 1300 CE. These villages, often called ring villages, show a really unique and organized social structure. You typically see a central plaza or a clearing surrounded by a ring of houses. Sometimes archaeologists have spotted outer rings of earthworks or ditches, which probably means they were for defense or just to mark off their space, and most of these places are being found using drones and satellite imagery. The Clovis people. These were an ancient group that lived in North America around 13,000 years ago. They are known for their stone tools, especially their fluted projectile points called Clovis points. The Clovers were some of the earliest known human inhabitants in North America. In 1929, a 19-year-old named Ridgely Whiteman discovered a Clovis site near Blackwater Draw in New Mexico. The site contains stone tools along with the remains of mammoths, which was evidence that there was human activity during the Pleistocene era. Before this, another big discovery happened in 1927 at the Folsom site, where the remains of a now extinct bison species were found alongside human-made tools. This was the first definitive evidence of humans in the Americas during that period. Excavations at Blackwater Draw revealed thousands of artifacts over several years, confirming the existence of a culture that relied heavily on hunting large game like mammoths. The Clovis people were highly mobile hunter-gatherers, but their culture didn't last forever. As the megafauna began to dwindle, so did the way of life for the Clovis people. That, along with the extinction of mammoths, which they may have relied heavily on for food. Çatalhöyük is a Neolithic settlement in Turkey that dates back around 7500 BC. It was rediscovered in the late 50s by James Mallart, who found these layers of buildings. Excavations showed that the settlement consisted of tightly packed mud brick houses, and there were no streets. So how did the people get around? Well, they moved around on the rooftops. Suffice to say, the architecture is fascinating and incredibly unique. Houses were accessed through holes in the ceiling, and there were no clear public buildings. They also found a ton of artifacts, from everyday tools to murals depicting hunting scenes and even human figures. People also buried their dead underneath their homes, and I briefly mentioned this before, but another really cool thing about this society was that there were no grand buildings or signs of a ruling class at all. It seems like social status was relatively equal among everyone. The people at Çatalhöyük were also into agriculture, growing grains like wheat and barley, while also hunting and gathering. The Olmecs were one of the earliest and most influential civilizations in Mesoamerica. They started to form around 1400 to 1200 BCE, but more recent discoveries may push them back even further, to about 16 to 15 BCE, thanks to findings at a site called El Manati. The Olmecs are believed to have evolved from early farming cultures in the Tabasco region, dating back as far as 5100 BCE. Their first major center was San Lorenzo. Tenochtitlan, the region's fertile land, and the Coatzacoalcos River helped support a pretty sizable population, leading to the rise of an elite class that demanded fancier goods. And the elites traded for materials like jade and obsidian found in far-off places, which means they had a trade network across Mesoamerica. As time went on, San Lorenzo eventually fell apart around 900 BCE. La Venta then took the spotlight. From 900 BCE until about 400 BCE, La Venta was home to the Great Pyramid, the Mesoamerican version, of course, the largest structure in Mesoamerica at the time, which still stands today. The Olmec civilization is most famous for their massive stone heads, believed to be portraits of their rulers. Each head is unique and is adorned with distinctive headdresses. The Khmer Empire was a powerful civilization in Southeast Asia that lasted from 802 CE to 1431, thereabouts. It stretched across present-day Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and parts of Vietnam. This empire was this blend of Buddhist and Hindu cultures which came about after centuries of conflict. The Khmer are also best known for their incredible architecture, particularly the temples of Angkor, which are still some of the most impressive monuments in the world. And a lot of these structures are, thankfully, still in remarkably good condition to this day. But like a lot of great civilizations, the Khmer Empire eventually began to decline. As for why? Well, one possibility is that the migration of Thai people slowly encroached on Khmer territory, similar to how Germanic tribes moved into the Roman Empire. This gradual takeover may have weakened the Khmer's political influence over time. Others think that constant warfare is what did them in. Another theory is that there could have been changes in the climate that messed with their agriculture. If rainfall patterns changed, the Khmer might have struggled to maintain their farms and mass amounts of people would have had to leave. The Nabta Playa people lived in southern Egypt around 6,000 to 11,000 years ago. They were primarily nomadic, moving around in search of food and water. Eventually, some members began to settle in the area, forming a more permanent civilization. As the climate started drying out, the region transformed into a desert, which would have sucked for them, but it did help preserve a lot of the artifacts that they left behind. One of the most famous things they left behind is the stone circle of Nabta Playa, which is the oldest known astronomical site on Earth. But along with marking the seasons, archaeologists have discovered animal remains in underground chambers, meaning that rituals may have taken place here as well. Like the other ancient civilizations on this list, the Nabta Playa people eventually disappeared. Climate change played a major role in their decline, pushing them to migrate and adapt elsewhere. And finally, the Minoan civilization lived on the Greek island of Crete from around 3000 to 1000 BC. They were a distinct culture recognized as the early ancestors of later ancient Greek society. The Minoans had pretty interesting religious lives, which included animal sacrifices, big festivals, and a number of cults celebrating nature and fertility. Egyptian hieroglyphs reference the Minoans, and from this we can determine they were active traders. They were also skilled in arts, coming up with beautiful pottery and intricate frescoes, but their civilization fell away, and one theory is that it was thanks to a volcanic eruption in the nearby Santorini Islands, which could have unleashed all these devastating tsunamis and ash clouds. Another theory comes from the Greek historian Herodotus, who thought that plagues and diseases might have been the cause. But like most of the ancient civilizations on this list, we don't know exactly how they disappeared.